Grabe, ang dami nun. What? Yo, what's up guys? Ako nga pala si Alan at welcome sa aking YouTube channel. So for this video, magre-react tayo sa The Battle of Yultong na yung mga Filipino troops daw ay pinadala sa South Korea nung panahon ng Korean War noong 1950s to 1953. So ang title ng video na re-reacta natin ngayon is How 1,000 Filipino troops fought alongside Allied forces versus 40,000 Chinese soldiers by Masid. So credit sa YouTube channel ni Masid dahil siya ang nag-upload ng video na ito patungkol sa history ng Filipino soldiers na nag-sacrifice ng kanilang buhay para lamang sa soberanya ng South Korea. So, nakalagay dito sa description nila is around 1,300 Filipino troops along with UN allied forces fought more than 40,000 Chinese soldiers in the Battle of Yultong, one of the largest offensives by the 44th Division of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army and the Communist North Korean Army during the Korean War. So, sabi dito na around 1,300 Filipino troops ang pinadala doon sa South Korea kasama ang mga UN allied forces na lumaban sa Chinese troops na 40,000. Isipin mo, 1,300 troops na Filipino alongside with UN troops laban sa 40,000 na mga Chinese troops. So, di ba guys, ang laki ng advantage nila when it comes to soldiers sa China. Pagdating sa Filipino naman is mga onti lang. Pero, sa video na to, dito natin malalaman kung gaano nga ba nila pinakita yung strategy nila sa paglaban sa maraming mga Chinese troops dito sa Battle of Yultong. So bago tayo magsimula sa video na to, wag niyong kalimutan bigyan ng like at subscribe sa aking YouTube channel. Click the notification bell beside the subscribe button para ma-notify ka sa mga future video uploads ko. And also don't forget to follow me on my Instagram account. I will put it down here. And tara, simulan natin ang pag-react sa video na ito.
In honor of those who sacrificed their lives for freedom, Masid proudly presents The Battle of Yultong, a story of how Filipino troops braved a sea of Chinese soldiers during the Korean War. The Korean War began on June 25, 1950, when North Korea, backed by China and the Soviet Union, crossed the border into South Korea in an attempt to capture its capital, Seoul. In response, the United Nations Security Council, through the formation of the United Nations Command, ordered the deployment of military forces to stop the invasion. On August 7, 1950, President Elpidio Quirino, with approval from Congress, sent 7,420 Filipino combat troops to fight in South Korea.
Wow,
President
madami
Quirino
pala yung
saw this
7,000.
as a commitment to help a friend and as part of a larger battle
answer.
to save the world from communism. The 10th Battalion Combat Team, the Philippine Expeditionary Forces to Korea, was the first battalion to arrive on Busan shores on September 19, 1950. The 10th Battalion, made up of 1,303 enlisted men and 64 officers, was originally a motorized battalion sent to operate tanks from the US, but when none arrived, was turned into a heavy weaponry unit instead. On the night of April 22, the 10th Battalion, as part of the US 65th Infantry Regiment of the US 3rd Infantry Division, was attacked.
So guys, dito sa video na to, pinakita nila yung animation nila na ginamit nila yung mga cute na mga maliliit na mga animations. Like, sobrang ganda talaga kasi yung tingnan kasi sobrang cute niya, napakaliit lang tapos ang lalaki ng mga ta. So, ang galing lang. Tsaka, Philippines pala ang kauna-hunahang batalyon na pinadala sa South Korea na kasunod ng mga ibang UN troops ng US, Australia, Thailand at ng UK. So, grabe pala, unang-una pala ang Pilipinas sa pagpapadala ng mga militar sa South Korea. So, sinacrifice nila yung buhay nila dito sa Korean War para lamang masugpo yung Communist Party. So, yun.
North of Yultong by a large force of Chinese and North Korean soldiers. This would be known in history as the Great Spring Offensive, one of the largest offensives by the 44th Division of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army and the Communist North Korean Army during the Korean War. In front of the Filipinos were 4 Chinese divisions numbering about 40,000 men. Just after midnight, the Chinese began their attack with a heavy artillery barrage. Soon after, the Chinese forces advanced, but had
Grabe, ang dami
10th
nun.
Battalion successfully defended their positions with mortar and artillery.
Wow.
However, a massive Chinese assault pushed the Turkish brigade from their position, allowing the Chinese to surround the Filipinos' eastern side. Seeing the incoming danger, Lieutenant Colonel Junicio Ojeda immediately organized a unit of battalion cooks and clerks to fortify and defend the east flank. With the help of M24 light tanks and artillery support, Lieutenant Colonel Ojeda's makeshift unit was able to hold off the advancing Chinese forces. The situation only got worse when the Puerto Rican 65th Infantry Regiment, situated on the west flank, began to fall back from Chinese attack. With the west flank now exposed, the Chinese began advancing
Meron pang
but were
mura
blocked
doon.
by a platoon of Filipino soldiers
Not yet,
situated
Moow.
on a hill overlooking Yultong. Commanded by Lieutenant Jose Arciaga, this platoon refused to yield, held their ground. This gave Lieutenant Arciaga's company commander, Captain Conrado Yap, enough time to mount a counterattack. The counterattack successfully extracted the trapped platoon from the hill and also stopped the Chinese from further advancing. But sadly, Lieutenant Arciaga and Captain Yap were killed during the fight. In the early morning of April 23, Lieutenant Colonel Ojeda led the second counterattack using M24 tanks. This caught the Chinese off guard and pushed them away from the hill they were trying to seize. The Filipinos fought until midday before it was ordered to withdraw and link up with the rest of the division in the south. 15 Filipino soldiers died, 26
Wow.
were wounded, and 14 were missing in action, while the Chinese and North Koreans lost around 500 soldiers. The
What?
10th Battalion's effort at
Ang daming namatay sa Chinese while sa Philippines is kaunti lang. Grabe, ang galing talaga ng mga Filipino troops. Kaya saludo po ako sa mga sundalo, sinakripisyo yung mga buhay nila para sa digmaang ito na naganap sa Korea. So, saludo po ako sa inyong lahat.
Yultong allowed the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division to successfully withdraw from the battlefield, which would later on prove to turn the war in favor of the Allies. 2 weeks later, the Communists began ceasefire negotiations after suffering more heavy losses. For the next 2 years, the Korean War was mostly battled from hilltops until a ceasefire was finally declared. Out of the 7,420 Filipino soldiers sent, 113 were killed, 313 wounded, 15 missing, and 41 held as prisoners of war. Today, a monument stands inside the War Memorial of Korea in honor of the many Filipino soldiers who fought for the liberation of Korea. Recently, during the 69th anniversary of the Korean War, the late Captain Conrado Yap was awarded the Taegeuk Medal, the highest
Wow.
military decoration given to a soldier for bravery in combat. Also
Ang taas
awarded
ng
the
medal
Taegeuk
na
Medal
yun.
was fellow 10th Battalion team member Major Maximo Young for his heroism at the Battle of Moow. The efforts of the 10th Battalion in the Battle of Yultong was instrumental in turning the tide of the war in favor of the Allied forces. South Korea remains a free democracy, thanks to the contribution of soldiers like the Fighting Filipinos, a name given by the U.S. Command to the brave men of the 10th Battalion Combat Team. Did you like our story? Are there other heroic adventures of Filipinos you want us to feature? Let us know in the comment box.
A few moments later.
So guys, tapos na natin panoorin or reactan tong video na to na The Battle of Yultong, na kung saan yung mga Filipino troops ay pinadala sa Korean War sa side ng mga UN troops and ng mga South Korean troops. So as a Filipino, sa side ng mga, yun nga, Filipino ako, 'di ba? So sa feeling ko, nakaka-proud lang kasi yung mga Filipino troops is sinakripisyo nila yung buhay nila sa digmaang ito. At saka nakikita ko rin kasi yung strategy nila Captain Conrado Yap, dahil sa yun nga na surrounded yung troops nila, tapos kailangan nilang rumisponde at tumulong para hindi na maka-move forward or para hindi na ma-pressure yung tropa nila. So ang galing-galing talaga ng mga Filipino troops sa time na to, at so nakakuha din sila ng highest medal na yung Taegeuk Medal. So yun yung pinakamataas na medal na natanggap nila mula dito sa pagtapos ng digmaan na ito. Actually hindi pa siya tapos, hanggang ngayon in war pa rin sila, pero nga nagkaroon sila ng treaty na magkakaroon sila ng demarcation line para dun magkakaroon ng usap or ng hanggang saan lang yung territory nila. So ayun lang, as a Filipino nakaka-proud lang na panoorin tong video na to kasi mga Filipinos din pala ang unang pinadalang mga sundalo dito sa digmaan na ito, at sila rin mismo yung nagprotekta sa mga tropa nila na pinipressure ng mga Chinese troops. So saludo po ako sa inyong lahat sa mga sundalo na lumaban sa Korean War na ito, at ayun lamang po yung reaction ko patungkol sa video na to. So kung hindi ka pa nakapag-like at mag-subscribe ka na sa YouTube channel ko, and click the notification bell beside the subscribe button para ma-notify ka sa mga future video uploads ko. And kung may gusto kayong i-comment dyan sa description box below sa mga gusto nyo ipareact sa akin, just comment down below and titingnan ko siya at baka i-reactan ko siya sa susunod. So ayun lamang po, maraming salamat sa panonood sa video na to. I hope na nag-enjoy ka, and thank you for watching. See you in my next video. Peace out.